order. Are we recording?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, first matter for consideration are the October 12th, 2018 minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review.
Move approval?
A second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Minutes pass. Okay, next item is the consideration of funding the transportation parking study. So again, thank you staff, always good to provide kind of the details of what's going on. As the group recalls, we had a discussion last time about the traffic study and understanding that the village board was also considering a traffic study and that we would seem to make sense to coordinate the two. So apologies for this, to me is a bit kind of last minute or not as organized as I would have liked. I was actually out of town and Jessica and I, or Rebecca and I have talked some about it, but this request came from the board that they've sort of come up with some, I guess, rough numbers of what the expectation is and have asked the CDA for a certain amount. I'd be very interested in the board's thoughts on this. My thought is that absolutely in concept, I think we should participate and help financially in a traffic study. We basically agreed to that last time. And I'd be interested in your two thoughts, because I'm sorry, I wasn't at the board meeting in the discussion, but this seems to be a little bit of cart before horse. It seems to me that, again, I think we can commit to participate at some level, but it would be important. I feel like the better path is to go out for the RFP, have the village go out for the RFP, get RFPs back, understand the scope, understand the cost, and then figure out what we can, how and how much we can participate, and what aligns with the CDA's role and obligations. From a money perspective, with respect to the discussion we had last time as it relates to the parking and traffic study, there is money in the TID 5 budget for this. I believe Mark has allocated $20,000 at this point, which is, he said he would, when he put that number in, he did not expect it to be that much, but he sort of likes to have a cushion for the just in case. But, you know, right now there is $20,000 earmarked for that kind of specific TID 5 traffic study.
Is that in, there's 20,000 of our general CDA activities?
No, this is specific within the TID. This is
TID.
This is
Okay.
not in our CDA money. So
Okay.
there's 20,000 there that is available. And to John's point, just as a reminder, we do have the money transferred to the CDA. There's a portion that is designated for facade programs, there's a portion that's dedicated for loan program, and then there's a portion dedicated for sort of other, and a lot of that is hard costs, staff time, and the like for the maintenance of the TID through its closing period. But then there is money that was, I would call it earmarked for other activities, but we do have flexibility to decide what's the best way to spend that or not. So again, we do have some dollars to contribute if we decide that's the right approach. But to me, I feel like we're committing to something before we really know what it is, and that makes me a little uncomfortable.
You know, just a quick question on the metro market. There was in the agreement, you know, some kind of contribution towards a parking traffic study. Is that a possibility to say, hey, you know, we're doing this, you guys kick in? I mean, I don't know what the
You guys meeting the owner?
Yeah, or is it, since it's in the agreement, I don't think if
It's in the agreement, but it's very vague.
It's very vague
as to
right.
funding. It doesn't stipulate that they're paying for it or we're paying for it. It just says this will happen, is basically the language of it, and
Okay.
it's silent on who. But I mean, I think it's reasonable to go back and say this was in the agreement and we believe it should be shared somehow.
Great, and if you're saying, you know, we need you guys to contribute 20%, you know, and they end up contributing 15%, it still gets us.
I think it's a
kinda-
reasonable
yeah,
request,
you know.
and I think we should make the request.
Didn't someone,
But they're
someone was
suing
supposed
us,
to
right?
call them?
So
Right.
Mike West was out of town. Allison actually met with him yesterday and was gonna get the names from the appropriate people he wanted to include in that next discussion. So we'll be scheduling that shortly, and then once we do, we'll be coming back to update you.
Is that Roundy's though, or Mike White's at this point? That,
Well, he's included
still
because of
owns-
the Mosaic.
Yeah, he owns the
I always wanna say the
Mosaic still.
Metropolitan,
Okay.
different building.
He does not no longer
So
own
we're not in
the Metro Market and the
a
parking,
lawsuit.
but he still owns the third component of the.
right, but
And then
but
there's
the
the-
parking, but with the, when, Kroger's, or I guess now, since they own the parking lot, would they be the,
So there's
yeah, I don't know how.
the parking structure is owned by someone different than Kroger's.
Okay,
Yes.
So it's involving those people.
okay.
So right now, there's only, we have like a property management company who's been our only point of contact for purposes of the structure itself in the building. So one of the things that we wanted to ask Michael is, who should we be in communication with? Like,
Got
who
it.
needs to be at the table, because if not, we're not gonna reach out to this
But again, for
corporations board.
purposes of this
I
discussion.
agree with you, you know, like, it's, like, let's find out exactly what the scope of the study is, see that, but I also agree that the, CDA should fund part of this, because, you know.
We basically agreed to do that
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what I'm hearing, I was obviously at the village board meeting, and, you know, there's, you know, we had estimated out what it would cost, and what I'm hearing is that there's not really an objection in principle to funding
Correct.
part of it.
Yep.
The question is, you know, what is it actually going to cost? We have this $20,000 earmarked from TID 5, we have, the Metro Market, we also have CDA money, so I don't, 30,000 to me sounds like it's a doable figure, but what I'm hearing is that you'd like a little bit more specifics, is that?
Well, maybe the two board members could speak to this. Why? What's the goal?
That was my objection to it.
What are we
can
spending
we-
100 grand
What can
for?
we do? We all know it's a cluster, you know, that 4-block stretch, but what are you gonna do about it? And why look at the
So, I
interior
think-
of
I
that,
This is
of that
village,
parking?
this is village-wide.
The village-wide, so I think that the thought and the reason for this being a priority for the village board is that there's sort of been a lot of Band-Aids that have been put on parking throughout the village. So in some areas, there's different rules and regulations and, in other areas, and so, you know, it's sort of this, like, you poke one spot and it kind of comes out another spot, and so we would like to try to figure out a collective decision about parking.
And you're
Oh,
talking
this
about
is parking.
specifically street parking at
This
night.
says
And
traffic.
also- and also-
I had talked to Allison at 10 o'clock last night about that exact
And
issue.
yeah.
Because that's the only, I mean, if you get outside of the business district, that's all we're talking about is street night parking, correct?
Also think about things like bike lanes, where to put bike lanes. Do they make sense on Murray as opposed to Oakland? That's something that's been bandied around. For another thing, on our village board agenda this coming week, we have, talking about parking on Kensington. So stuff like that would allow us to take a more holistic view as to kind of all these different things that involve both traffic and parking if we have this comprehensive study.
So again, I think I think all we can do at this point is Leslie, what you just said. We can agree in concept that we will help in some way support the cost of it, but to commit to a dollar amount or anything more than that, I think is premature on our
Agreed.
part.
So for purposes of timeline, over the next month, we're gonna be internally, developing the RFP. We can give that to you. We've developed the RFP so far for, that portion that our areas would include for Metro Market and the parking structure. But we're gonna be doing the overall scope, for the entire study, so we'll be doing that. Thinking that it may be, I'm not sure in terms of timing. I thought it was reasonable to be able to accomplish in a month, but people keep telling Bart and I no.
I mean, we can definitely have a
So we'll
draft.
see.
There's no problem having a draft by next month, whether it's
Yeah.
everyone's preferred draft, I guess, is what we're
Right,
hearing, so.
so
And I
we'll
think
keep you posted.
Just maybe, one of the other questions I had, it was unclear to me, again, we have this 20,000 budgeted, it was unclear to me whether the board was factoring that in already to village contribution, and so the CD was gonna be another 30,000 on top of that, or
I
if.
think the 30,000 would not be on top of the village's contribution, so the village would contribute, or if my memory serves me correctly, was the village would be contributing the 60.
Well, I guess my
the
question
CDA.
is, sorry.
Yeah, no.
For TID, the TID 5 budgeted money, where is that being
Who gets the
considered?
credit?
Is that considered within our CDA requested 30,000? And so we're really looking for 10,000 out of our CDA money?
Mhm.
Or was that factored into the village's contribution?
It wasn't discussed.
I don't think
Okay.
that, yeah, I don't
Well,
think we
yeah.
made a
Well,
decision.
we did earmark $50,000, so I don't think we
Okay, out of the
contemplated.
Yes.
village budget.
Correct.
Correct, so 50,000 from the village.
So then I interpret
30,000 was contemplated from the CDA. It was
Right.
not specific as it was, whether it was from CDA designated funds or from TID
Mhm.
5.
Yes.
And then 10,000 from the parking utility.
Mhm.
So I think if we have that 20,000 from TID 5, which is what we
We're
almost
almost
talked about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a way there. You might get,
I
I
don't
don't
wanna
think you get
get-
some money from Metro Market,
Right.
you know, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, so it gets,
Yeah.
And again, to me, it depends on it depends on the scope of the study. As some were talking, we're really rough guessing, sort of 90 grand, but this could be a big
Mhm.
study. It could be twice that. And then.
Yeah, especially if
so
you're
we
talking
don't know
about bike
that.
lanes and other,
Yes.
because you're talking about DPW
Right.
issues and snow removal, and you're going way beyond
That's, yeah, so.
just
Well-
traffic and parking. I mean, it could get huge.
So one of the things that we anticipate doing, because we, with talking with the traffic engineer, they developed this cost estimate. So it's an estimate, right? It hasn't been put out for proposal. We know that that's what we try to do for budgeting, but we can't, we haven't gotten competitive bids because there hasn't been an agreed scope.
Mhm.
So one of the things I think that we're gonna seek to do in the RFP is, have alternates in terms of how that looks, because you're not off base. There've been many people who have said, wait a second, if the scope blows up to be something unmanageable, what West Dallas had just done a larger study and came in at like 165,000 or something. So we wanna be able to try to find some compartments, so if it does come back larger, we can say, okay, here's what we have.
Mhm. Modularize it.
Now what do we wanna do?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's, and it's been the last week, everyone's abuzz about the scope and concerns of cost.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of been following this, and I guess I'd like to come back to the question of why. Like, who's pushing for this? Is it internally planning? Is it the board? Is it residents? Everybody? I mean, I know everyone's always talking about parking, but that doesn't mean we have to do a study because everyone's always talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's been a mix. I think it's the board and I think it's been residents. I mean, just from my own personal experience, kind of outside of after taxes, that's the number 2 issue that people have is traffic and parking in the village.
Perceived issue.
Yes, I mean,
There's always a perceived issue of parking everywhere, in every county, in
Yes,
every city,
yes.
on every block.
And I grew up, I'm
But
from
whether or
Los
not there's a
Angeles,
real
so I
issue or
get
not,
that.
that's
Like,
the issue.
Yes, like, it's all relative too, so I think that
That's-
that's also part of it.
Yeah.
Living in a big city like Los Angeles, where parking really is an
Yeah.
issue, I find
It's
it.
not such a big deal to walk a block.
Right, exactly.
I just
But I
did.
do, right. But I do think that we do have some opportunities to understand some things a little bit better and maybe have a better comprehensive program. We've also had a lot of feedback from residents on Morris, which has changed a lot of the traffic patterns, that has increased tremendously, on that street. So, I think that it's sort of from two different groups, to answer your question of why.
Yeah.
And again, that's the board, that's not our, obviously, I agree with, it's a good question.
Well, then that was my next question is, what is the purview of the CDA in this stuff? I mean,
That's where I wanted to
do
go
we
to, right?
even oversee this?
I think
Is
we
this
got
a part
skin
of-
in the, to be honest with you, I think, it's a board decision on, like, this is a priority for the community. I think we got skin in the game because of all the, different things we've been doing over the years.
Well, I think we have a commitment
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
developers agreement to do.
Well, we have a commitment to
We're
develop,
required to
but
do
we've
it.
changed the traffic patterns. I mean, let's face facts.
And we
That's
knew-
why
we knew
we
it
put
would.
the commitment in there.
Right,
Yeah.
to understand the impact and what
Right,
we can do
Sure.
to fix it. So, I mean, if nothing else, we have a specific commitment to do a parking and traffic study.
Right,
It was
So-
limited along,
Yes.
on Oakland,
Right.
or that, whatever that,
Whatever the impacted
yeah,
area
stretch
is.
and maybe a couple
Right.
blocks
Right.
off or whatever
Right.
the
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
zone is.
Yeah, it's certainly a chunk of that, and also to reemphasize Jessica's point, parking and traffic is something that we get, at the village board level, we get called upon to make decisions on, And it feels in a way as though you're making a decision in a vacuum
Yeah.
without some sort of study or data. So instead of we're just making a lot of decisions in a vacuum, which may or may not make the situation better in different parts of the village. This would allow us to have that data where we can make good decisions, both within kind of the place, within sort of residential neighborhoods and also, you know, the more business neighborhoods in the village, so.
But I think that this committee, wearing our CDA hats, needs to, you know, really focus on what the CDA's mission is. And it's not to do traffic and parking studies, it's to do development and housing. And so we put that 20,000 in there, and then we're gonna go to the Metro Market and see if we can get them to kick in some more. But we now have a really limited pot of development money. We used to be able to replenish it through the TID. We don't. We have a limited amount to use for development and housing, not parking studies. So I think, you know, we need to be careful wearing our CDA hat, that we are responsible and we do what we've committed to, but we aren't this funding source for
Excellent point.
other
Yes.
issues that the board feels, you know,
Yeah,
are their priority.
we talked about that.
Okay, I just-
I agree with you, I think this is a bit of a, could be a bit of a slippery slope, we do not wanna see,
You don't wanna go beyond what they've outlined here, and you might not be able to, depending upon.
Could be
Yeah.
really
Well, I guess,
bizarre.
I'm saying, I don't want, again, we have 3 buckets, 1 bucket does have a bit of flexibility, I don't want that to be seen as a slush fund to fill gaps.
And I don't think,
I don't think
things
we're
that
gonna
they
do
don't.
that.
Right.
I don't think that
But this
makes
does
sense.
not seem out of proportion.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
I agree, at this point, where we are, it's
You
in the
know,
scope,
it seems out of,
No,
No,
I
yeah,
agree. We,
yeah.
remember,
but we need to
were-
make sure it does.
Yeah, we
That's-
budgeted that because we wanted to do that study, and then we said, we'll wait and fold our piece in with the village-wide one.
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what works.
even the 20,000, you know, we need to be, I don't think we just say, yeah, here's the 20,000, because we need, it needs to be consistent with TID 5, right? And so, if the scope of the project, you know, we really need to do some math when we understand the scope of the overall project to say, is 20,000 a legitimate amount? Is TID 5, again, let's say it comes in at
no, I get what
100,000.
you're saying.
Is
You wanna
TID 5
see-
20% of the overall, yes or no? And if it's not, we need to be fair to TID 5 to say it shouldn't be funding 20%, if really it's only 10% of the overall study, then we should be putting in 10,000. And then we have to work through that math. So it's not just 20,000 that's there to use regardless.
Just as a suggestion, because it's listed for consideration.
Yep.
Perhaps you may wanna just consider, doing a motion to defer a decision on this item, until we have, the draft scope and we've also received back the RFPs. So that we can talk about, and we can make a point, like through evaluating that, show you how we may be breaking it out into segments and kind of keep the CDA, because you're a main stakeholder of this, in my view, kind of at the table as we kind of go through the different dynamics. And then at that point, then you can make the
Yes.
decision about how you're comfortable, no different than the board will need to make their decision
Yes. Yep.
about what they're comfortable moving forward with.
Yep.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll
Okay.
kind of have to work hand in glove in terms of who's
Yeah.
comfortable with what and what study we're
Yep.
selecting, but.
And just know that internally, we're having, discussions about, a smaller work group that would work with this study moving forward. So because you're a main stakeholder as a group, if anyone has an interest in being a representative to participate on the CDA's behalf in that smaller subgroup, we would be interested to hear from you.
And also, I mean, I obviously need to talk to Allison, because there's a bit of a disconnect here in how this, in my mind, and how this occurred. I would have liked maybe the discussion process to have happened a little bit differently in my mind, just to understand. I feel like this just sort of kind of came up out of nowhere for us to consider, and maybe that's the way it works, I don't know, but it seems like there may be other better ways to have dialogue as things are moving through a process, that we're aware of what's going on.
That's good feedback.
Something coming right to consideration to me is, I don't know, I usually like to have a conversation something like this, a conversation beforehand, so.
And this is kind of.
Again, that's on me to talk to Allison, just to make sure we've got good communication.
And functionally, that's kind of what we're doing by making a motion to defer this until.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, we're starting the conversation, and just know that from the board's perspective, we're trying, this year has been a really big year of transition. This fabulous two new board members, and so, one of the things that we're looking to do is kind of capitalize on that process next year, because we're gonna have first and second quarter to be able to work with this group. To kind of make some progress on some things so that we can do some more forecasting and planning about what is coming up, for all the committees that we have. So that people can see a roadmap, which of course adjusts, but that we can kind of be looking at.
Can I make a suggestion just into blank space? I've always wanted to see a connection made between the bike path and the central business district, like a dedicated bike lane
Ooh.
with signs on the bike path, pointing out what our businesses are, and I think the businesses would see a value in that, and maybe be more
It's a great.
in line with, you know, supporting our funding of
It's a
it.
great idea.
Yeah.
People come down that and they see, you know, Campfire, Cloud Red this way.
Drop off for a beer before you hop back on the.
Yeah, and have one to find a good
I was
dedicated
just in
lane.
Prague, they're all about biking and having a beer and then getting.
Works for me.
Or tea or coffee or whatever it may
Nah,
be. Yes, great.
That's a great point, because think about how many people go through there.
Exactly
I
right.
mean, it
We
is
just
just a
thoroughfare.
huge asset.
yeah, and we could probably charge for the signage a little bit, enough to pay for some of the, you know, maintenance cost on the bike lane.
Mhm.
Just come straight up Lake Bluff. I don't know where to put the cut throughs down there, but, I
Something
think that'd be
else we
great.
can
Okay,
consider.
so we have that motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
I motion we defer.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
And just for clarification, that was until the RFP.
Right.
that
Yes.
was
Yeah.
passed. Okay, that's what I thought you meant.
Just the way you said it.
Did you get the language?
Yeah, just
The
see
Yeah,
CSA?
and
Yeah.
I can
Okay.
clarify with the board as well.
Let's defer till scope and RFP. Okay, thank you, everybody. Next item is Kensington Liquor Business Loan Status,
Yeah.
no update.
No update. So,
Well, I didn't know the mail system was that bad.
Especially when it's going like 5 blocks, right?
yeah. Just so you know, I did ask, I was like, well, you could just walk down, or I could walk,
Yeah.
I could come pick it up, or I could, like.
When I was trying to think about this, and you know, as a young attorney, I used to, you know, some of the collections work landed on my
Right.
desk,
Mhm.
and you know, if we called like